Well, hey everyone, I am your host, Curt Gentry, and welcome to the Vibrant Life Show. This show is all about exploring the purposes God has placed in our lives and the passions He's placed in our hearts to reach the community He's placed us in for such a time as this. So whether we're hearing stories of those living out their passions, helping you discover your purpose, asking hard questions, or leaning into cultural moments, the hope of this show is to remind us that the life that we're called to live is an adventurous one, a meaningful one, a purposeful one. We are invited to live the vibrant life. And I just want to welcome you back to part 2 of my conversation with Pastor Curt Gentry. He's a lead pastor here at Renovation Church in Phoenix, Arizona, and he just happens to be my dad. God bless him for all of the years he's had to put up with me. But I just want to welcome you back into our conversation. If you didn't get a chance to listen to part 1, you can always do that anywhere you stream, whether any platform or on YouTube. We're over there at the Vibrant Life Show. But we're going to recap just a little bit and go into a different part of this conversation. So just go ahead and jump on in. You can listen to that later. So Dad, welcome to the Vibrant Life Show.
Well, it's great to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you said yes to staying for another show, because we could talk about a lot of things for a long time, can't we?
Exactly. That's for sure.
So to recap just a little bit about you, who you are, like I said, you're lead pastor at Renovation Church. I'm actually full-time with you, which, well, I always tell people, God tricked me into that. Do you remember asking me to come join when... God bless you.
You were still a volleyball coach and at Valley Christian, and so, yeah.
Yeah, 9 years ago, you took that leap.
We did.
And so you started that. You've been in ministry for quite a long time. How many years?
30 this year.
30 years. Okay.
Yeah, it's flown by.
And and I guess I have some other siblings out there somewhere and nieces. Lots of nieces. Yeah. We got lots of...
Keep adding.
Keep adding the girls. No, I'm so glad you're here, Dad. And one of the life passions that I've watched you do is this creation of a thing called Uncommon. And we talked last time about how to live uncommon, ways that we get stuck. Could you kind of go back into... We talked about the Barna study. Mm-hmm. And where people get stuck in church activities and knowing that God's created us for more. So can you just recap what is Uncommon? And we're going to jump into the relational side of it.
Yes, the Uncommon for us has been a process of 25 years of really honestly writing it. But in the last 10 years, it's been more as a training to help people. And if you listen the last time, we get kind of capped and stopped in their journey of coming into the fullness of what Christ has for them. My life verse has been for 25 years or so at least, John 10:10, that the thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus says He has come that we may have life and live it to the full, living life abundantly, living life to the max, as we used to call it in the youth group. But so my intention and my hope is always to help people live into the fullness of what God has for them. And for the most part, people know it. They just don't know how to get there. Right. And so we're trying to help them rediscover that and the uniqueness it is for them.
Yeah. Where do you feel like that came from for you, this need to help people live into what God has really created them to do?
Well, I think for me was when I gave my life to the Lord, I got a full dose of whatever that transformation was, and it hasn't stopped.
And you came to know the Lord at
26, and I had 10 years away from church or any semblance of that. And so for me, when I really gave my life to the Lord, it was... I really couldn't believe how explosive it was in my life and how transformative specifically it was for me. But as time went on, I didn't really see that for other people. And so then I was a layman for 6 years and worked at an aluminum company, ran a mill, or what they called a scalper, did those kind of things and had my ministry there. But then when I got into ministry full time, then I began to look at developing ways to say, how can people lean into this? And one of them is leadership or influence. Our vision statement at Renovation is to raise up influencers through spiritual transformation to be salt and light where they're engaged and influential. So my intention has always been, as I say always, but since I've been in ministry, to raise up influencers or leaders. And the only way I know for them to be everything they're supposed to be is to live into the fullness of what God has for them.
Right.
And so we begin to develop that.
I also want to point out that you used the phrase influencers before it got hijacked by social media.
I did. You've been using that a long
time. And why do you use the word influence?
Well, because I think when you use the term leader, because I used to use leader, developing leaders, but what I realized was people would opt out, where they would say, "Well, I did youth ministry. Well, I'm a seventh grader. I can't. I'm not a leader. I'm just a seventh grader, or I'm a mom who's raising his. Wherever it is, I'm not really a leader. I don't have a title. Everyone is an influencer,
right?
And so this now captures everyone. So there's really not an opting out. Is the reason why we went that route,
right? And that means that this living uncommon is available for
exactly
everyone when they give their lives to Christ and see with new eyes, as you say, how God's actually created them to give back to not only the church community, but everyone, to love their neighbors.
Well, it's just fulfilling. I mean, what we're trying to help them is fulfill the great commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, but love your neighbors yourself. And how do I do that best? Is for me to live into the fullness of what God has for me,
right?
And not for my best interest, but for the advancement of the kingdom and the good, which ultimately is the good of others.
Right. And last time we touched on the 4 areas. You talked about your training, the 4 points of uncommon. We start at location, we go to route, vehicle, and destination. And how you say destination is always Christ-likeness. That's what this whole part is like, that transforming into who Christ is in our own lives. And so last time we talked about built around and blind spot in our location. Where are you? And why do you feel like it can be important for people to take the time to really ask other people for blind spots in their lives, and then also really lean into the gifts and the stories that God actually has within them?
Well, again, if you don't deal with some of the stuff in your life, you again, going back to Barna's study about being in our phrase capped, the hopeless meandering, you feel like you're just kind of spinning your wheels. If you don't dig down deeper and begin to say, okay, how do I address these specific things? And I just think you'll kind of stay in that circle from now on, and just kind of like you're going around the mountain again. And I've said this before, I don't mind going around the mountain, but I want to learn. I don't want to go around the same mountain again.
Right.
Okay. I don't mind God taking me in the wilderness, and I don't really try to get out of the wilderness. I try to pray my way out of the wilderness. But my question is, what can I get out of the wilderness?
Right.
What is God doing in my life? But I don't want to keep going around the same mountain.
No.
And that's what stresses you out and fatigues you and almost makes you give up. So how do we deal with those things as we move forward? Because
many times, we talked about the Barna study, but so many of us as believers kind of are in that, like we talked about the 5 C's last time in the circles, how God's given you this vision for how to kind of locate people, and people can locate themselves in it. So many of us are convinced that Jesus is the way, yet we're not necessarily moving forward into more that where it actually changes our daily lives, like how we're actually operating. And then I feel like sometimes we see people and we're like, well, that's good for them. Like, of course, like they must have gotten an extra. Some people might look at you and be like, well, you just got an extra dose of the Holy Spirit when you were converted. And who knows, unmerited favor. Like God gives however much grace, he has unlimited amounts for each person. But what would you say to people who would be like, well, because you're a pastor, of course you would be more passionate and feel like you have to be closer to God?
Well, clarify, I was not always a pastor.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. I wasn't a pastor for the first 6 years of my walk. My volunteering and all the other things that went with it. But I was passionate leading people to the Lord way before I ever thought I was going to. The first 8 months, before I knew I was going to call to preach, the first 8 months, I've said this often, my theology was terrible. But my passion to see people come to know Jesus was 100%. And so I was leading people to the Lord, whether or not I was saying the right words. So I never thought I was going to become a pastor or preacher for sure. I mean, I've said this, I was the guy in college who realized it was in speech class. I was going to have to actually give a speech at some point. So I dropped out of the class.
I thought you dropped out of college after that.
Well, I dropped out of college. That's a whole different deal.
I thought it was because of speech
That's
class.
your mom's fault. No, that's
Blame
not true.
Jan. She's not here.
That's not true.
We love you, Jan.
But, so it's just interesting to me that for people, when they begin to discover that their life has not been wasted, when they realize that, wow, okay, that ugliness or that part of my life, and I want to clarify something. I know I'm breaking here a little bit. Clarify something from when I talk about the 5 C's. At least for us in Renovation, people are welcomed at any stage. Yeah. No faith, upset at God, wherever that is, they're welcomed at any point. And we tell people when they come to Renovation, you can stay here from now on at any circle, but you'll probably eventually feel a little uncomfortable because we're going to challenge you to live into the fullness of what God has for you. But what I want to say to them is, there's a reason why you're still here.
Right.
You need to stick around and see what the fight was all about. The obstacles that were put in front of you to even make it to this point. Boy, God's got a plan, and we just want to help you figure that out.
Right. And the thing is, too, is I think deep down we want to keep growing. We don't like just living in maintenance mode. I mean, to some extent, yes, because it brings comfort and it brings like stability, I think, in our lives, which is nice to have. I think God does that for us with the sun coming up and going down every morning. Like there's a consistency and a stability that God creates even in nature for us. But at the same time, we are called to transform and to renew our minds and to really grow and metamorphosis really into everything that God's created us to be. And I can say, for one, this idea of uncommon wrecked my world in the best way and changed me to really see that God, I wasn't just crazy and that I'd already done all of those things in my life and it discounted me from something. Actually, what I could do in the hands of God, not in my hands, but give me back over to Him, He could actually use that for good. Horrible things He could use for good. And it doesn't matter, like it's great. It's an honor to be a pastor for you or, to preach for me or to do this show, but it you don't have to have that to be on fire. You don't have to be that to be set apart. You can do this whether you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a stay-at-home dad or whoever you might be, or you are working, you have your own business somewhere and you're working remote. Like you have the opportunity in front of you to impact people. And if you're just joining us on the Vibrant Life Show, I'm here with Pastor Curt Gentry, aka a pastor dad, and we're talking about living uncommon, living into everything that God's created us to be, really. But what is so important, what you touched on earlier with Blind Spot, is that you really have to have people around you. And the location piece and a little bit of the route is more like locating where you are, and people are involved in that conversation for sure, but along the way, we really need community. So can you talk a little bit about the need for relationships and deep relationships in our lives and how we can really develop them as we are on this journey to live uncommon?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for most of us is that even in churches, and I've been doing this a long time, we can be walking in every week and we know people by name. We even know a little bit about them, but we really don't know them. And, Wesley used to say, how is it with your soul? Be the first question in their groups. Well, that's a loaded question, if you will, and right. Most of us don't go there. But the need for relationships that go to what I call, when I teach on this, is 3 levels. One is their small talk relationship, and small talk can be way more than how's the weather. It can go way deeper than that. But what I know is couples can stay in small talk for 50 years. And then what I mean by small talk, there's certain things that have already been taken off the table. They're not talking about them anymore. They're not going to dig into them and figure out how to work through it. They're just off the table. So it leaves that relationship in small talk, what I call small talk level. The second level is where you can have tension and passion within a discussion without separation. And what I mean by that is you and I are close enough and we are secure in our relationship where we can disagree even with passion. But we know there's not going to be any type of separation in our relationship because we know that the work has been done. It's not small talk anymore. Then the third level is to share habits, bad habits, strengths, weaknesses, dreams, hurts, that I'm at a deep enough level to be able to share those kind of things. I tell people often, even about dreams, you need to be real careful who you share your dreams with. Really careful. Because if you're not in a good enough position with that person and know them well enough and deep enough, either one, they're jealous of it or they're going to try to put it out, and make you feel like that's the stupidest thing ever. And so you need to be real careful, even especially your hurts, a lot of those things, because again, back to the fan part of it. You're not going to have many in your life that are at that level, but you need to trust those people you share those things with. So how practically we have done that through youth ministry, through raising you four, Mom and I have, and the four of you guys, and along with what we do with our whole family now, is something we call sweat, laugh, cry, dream. And sweat means we accomplish something together. Doesn't mean we necessarily are sweating, but we build something together. We go do something together, but we're accomplishing something. To laugh, we just are intentional. We were very intentional in youth ministry and in our family about laughing together, finding ways to do fun. That could even mean going to Six Flags. It could even mean, but we find ways to just laugh and have fun. Cry, you cannot orchestrate that, but you cannot run from it. You've got to be in a place where when the crying happens, if you have a 14-year-old that gets cut from the volleyball team and they're crying about it, you don't go in as a parent and go, oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Let me tell you about how life's really going to roll, okay? It's going to be this. No, you just listen, and you're there for them when they cry. And there's a lot of scenarios, even especially people when they're grieving or mourning, that don't run from it. Right. Don't run from it. And the fourth one is dream. Sweat, laugh, cry, dream. And as you well know, that's something that was a big part of our family. And but we want to encourage dreaming. And I think when you discount other people's dreams, man, that's a bad place to be. Let people, you know well enough, you would say, hey, I want to be an astronaut. And
I really said that. This is a thing that I wanted to be until I was a senior in high school. So what
did we try to do? We tried to get you enough information to try to figure out how to do that.
Do you still have those NASA VCR tapes?
Yeah, out in the storage. Still have them.
I think I still have maps of the moon.
So the sweat, laugh, cry, dream, accomplish something together, have fun. When it comes to crying, don't run from it. Yeah. Lean into it, and man, figure out ways to dream. And so that's really how we try to develop relationships.
Right. I actually have a friend who consistently, like when we do something, she's like SLCD, like sweat, laugh, cry, dream, because it's either, it could be something on a team. If you're leading a team together and you're doing a project together and you're like, okay, we need everyone on deck this day to put, I run a Rise, which is an event, a monthly event here in Phoenix for women. And when our team gets there on the Sunday before to set up everything, something happens when, it's not necessarily all of our gifts to, set up stuff. It's not all of our, favorite things that we ever do. But what happens is it builds relationship within that community of leaders that are pulling tables out and setting up decorations and doing stuff in the worship center and doing those things. How it creates that sweat part actually invites the laughing, the crying, and dreaming.
It does.
And you used to do that on our mission trips a lot. I would say that even on mission trips, that happened the most because we were literally sweating together during the day. And how would that end up by the end of the week?
Well, and I think it's mission trips, and again, you can get me off on a whole different subject here because I've probably led 40 or so over the years, and from in overseas and here in the U.S. But you realize over that week, orchestrate it, lack of a better way, and get out of the way too. Okay, so you're
explain what you mean by that.
So you're trying to. There's a concept. Okay, you've done it enough now to know by the end of the week these folks don't. Now some of them will because they've been with you before, but they don't know what the transformation is going to look like in this community by the end of the week. So you put things in place like Sweat, Laugh, Cry, Dream, but you also get out of the way, and you let the Holy Spirit do the work, and not only in your own life but in their life. And so you don't always have it all orchestrated down to the T,
right.
Down to the exact thing, but you give the framework for those things to unfold. And by the time we're sitting around debriefing that last night before we go home, it's unbelievable to hear the laughter and the crying and the transformation in their lives.
Right. It was just so interesting because when you sometimes I've gone on a trip and I look at the list of people that I'm going with and I'm like, oh no.
Oh, believe me.
These are not my people. And I think but then, I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm sure somebody thought that about me too. Why? But by the end, you're family. You feel like family, and it's these eclectic group of people with different gifts, different quirks, different stories that come in, and we end up feeling like one at the end. And I think that's what really the church should be like.
Exactly.
Unity in diversity, but this is an avenue to sweat, laugh, cry, dream. And what are one of the ways we've done that as a family, would you say?
Well, the dreaming part of it, for sure, is that one of the last things we do on our vacations. We did it for years, and I don't even know I don't know why I came up with it. I mean, why we decided to do this. I wasn't raised this way, even though my parents were awesome. We just didn't do this. Is that the last night before we go home, we'll may spend 3 or 4 hours just sitting out on a balcony somewhere or wherever it is, and we just dream. We've done it around fire pits out at Usery Mountain Park, just sitting around fire pits or whatever it may be, and just dreaming. Let everybody kind of express what if they had a choice, if everything else was kind of, there was no restrictions. I mean, time and money and all. What would you do?
What would you do?
What would you do? And so those are some of the ways we've done it as a family. But you have other thoughts.
Yeah, I think that. And one thing I think might be tangible for other people who are listening, if you have kids in the house or teenagers, one of the things that we did was Monday night dinners. And we would sit together for hours. A lot of time, you just knew that it was going to be a couple of hours. It just was what it was. And we would have dinner, but then we would hang out and talk. I mean, to the point where we were laughing, falling out of our chairs laughing. I mean, although sometimes I probably got upset about something and ran to my room and shut the door, but that's another story for another day. And but we would really be sitting there, and then we would talk through what's going on in our lives, probably crying quite a bit along the way, especially, your emotional second child, which was me. And but just dreaming, but we would go around and pray. We would do our prayer requests, and then we would all have to pray. And which always scared me because I didn't like praying out loud.
Which is unusual for you to be doing this now.
I know, which is how God is funny. But it's just maybe one way that people, if you want to take a tangible way of doing it, it doesn't have to be manufactured I wouldn't put expectations on it, but whether you're leading a team, you're leading a family, or you have friends and you're single like me, my friends, we try to do stuff. We go hiking. What are some other ways maybe some people could lean into one or all of these parts?
and again, back to just be creative in what your uniqueness of your family, if it's that, or a friend group. Just kind of, like I said, accomplishing something can be doing yard work, or cleaning the house. One of the things I've said often about parents, they take away chores from their kids, and then you go, well, chores, that's an old school. But what it says is that you're valuable in our family.
That's
good.
You
by you taking out the trash, it brings more value to you, and when we begin to remove those things from our kids, of things they're responsible for, we tell them that we can do this without you.
Right.
And one of the things I always said about teenagers is that in so many ways, they were a huge part of helping the family move forward back in the old days, but now. We look around and go, many times we look at teenagers as kind of the drain on the family because they're taking fun. No, give them things to do. Give them value. And part of that is accomplishing and the sweating part of it.
Yeah,
So,
and that's where everyone has this place at the table.
exactly.
Everyone can live uncommon. Everyone has influence, but you cannot do it alone.
No.
And to reach Christ-likeness, to that destination, you really need deep relationships around you to
Exactly.
live a vibrant life. So if you want to contact Curt Gentry, you can go to renovationphx.com. We have a whole series going on the uncommon life. Dad, thank you for being in the studio.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Love you. Thank you for joining me on the Vibrant Life Show. I would love to connect with you and get to know you. My favorite place to hang out is over on Instagram at ali.gentry or over on Facebook. You can also go to my website, aligentry.com. That's ALIGENTRY.com. Sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date and get links to the show on all platforms after we air, the show's YouTube channel, and really just all the things. I'm so honored to get to hang out with you today. My heart is that you remember that each day is an invitation to live the vibrant life.